There is a man in the NFL that earns tens of millions of dollars, and he still eats free meals at the team facility just to avoid spending his own money on food. Another player drives a car so cheap you wouldn't believe the price, even if I told you right now. And one of them found a way to live for 2 full years without ever paying a single dollar in rent. Now here's the part that changes everything. 78% of NFL players go completely broke within 5 years of retirement. Men who earned millions left with absolutely nothing. But the 10 players in this story chose a completely different path. Some saved everything. Some never spent a single dollar of their NFL salary. And some made choices so extreme that even their own teammates couldn't understand them. 10 Black NFL players. 10 stories of extreme wealth lived with extreme simplicity. Stay until the end, because the deeper this list goes, the harder each story becomes to believe. So let's start with the story that will make you smile first. Alfred Morris is a black running back who earned over $10 million in the NFL. But every single day he drove to practice in a 1991 Mazda 626 that he bought from his college pastor for just $2. He named the car Bentley. While his teammates pulled up in Ferraris and Range Rovers, Morris parked his beat-up Mazda right next to them and didn't care one bit. He once told reporters, "It's always going to be my baby, and I'm going to drive it till she dies." He came from Pensacola, Florida, one of 7 sons, with a father in construction and a mother with a master's degree. That car wasn't about saving money. It was about remembering who he was before the millions arrived. $2, $10 million career, same car, same man. But the next player on this list takes frugality to a completely different level, and it happens right at his feet. Now meet a man who earns $10.75 million a year and still picks up pennies off the ground. Christian Wilkins is a black defensive lineman for the Miami Dolphins, and his teammates have watched him stop mid-conversation, bend down, pick up a penny, and genuinely celebrate finding it. A man earning nearly $11 million a year getting excited about 1 cent. But here's the thing, this habit didn't start in the NFL. Before going pro, Wilkins rode his bike everywhere at Clemson University instead of driving a car. He worked as a substitute teacher earning just $80 a day, and he saved every bit of it. That's roughly $29,000 a year back then. His 2023 salary was 370 times that amount. But the habit never changed, not even a little. Even now, as a millionaire, he spends as much time as possible at the team facility, eating free meals and keeping his utility bills low at home. In Miami, one of the most expensive cities in America, where every athlete is expected to live loud and spend big, Wilkins picks up pennies instead. And that's not poverty thinking. That's respect for money at every level, because a man who notices value in a single cent is not going to waste the millions either. That penny is not the point. The habit behind it is what separates him from the 78% who go broke. But the next player takes this even further. He didn't just have a habit, he built an entire system, saving 70% of everything he earned until his investments matched his entire NFL career earnings. Now this is where frugality stops being a habit and becomes a full system. Glover Quinn is a black safety who earned over $33 million playing for the Texans and Lions. Most people would call that set for life. Quinn called it just the beginning. He saved 70% of his after-tax income every single year. He rented modestly instead of buying expensive homes because a mortgage locks you into fixed expenses that limit your flexibility. He drove reliable but completely unremarkable cars. No supercars, no custom wraps, no attention. He ate at the team facility and cooked at home instead of spending on restaurants. There were no viral luxury purchases, no public jewelry collections, no flashy real estate moves. His teammates described his lifestyle as calm, normal, almost boring. But here's what that boring lifestyle actually produced. Quinn told reporters that his investments generated the same amount of money as his entire $33 million NFL career. Let that sink in. He turned one career into 2 careers worth of wealth, not by earning more, but by spending less and investing the difference. The 70% he saved wasn't just sitting in a bank account, it was invested, growing, and compounding across years of NFL-level income. While teammates who earned the same money were spending it on things that lost value overnight, Quinn was quietly compounding it into things that grew value every single year. The boring lifestyle wasn't a sacrifice. It was the investment vehicle itself. And the vehicle delivered a double NFL career. without ever playing a second snap. That's the difference between spending 70% of your income and saving 70%. It's not just a lifestyle gap, it's a generational wealth gap. But the next player on this list didn't just save his money, he gave it away to a cause so personal and so powerful that his story isn't really about money at all. Now this is where the story gets deeply personal. Warrick Dunn is a black running back who earned over $60 million playing for the Buccaneers and Falcons. But his most important legacy is not what he kept, it's what he gave away. And to understand why, you need to know what happened when he was just 18. His mother, a police officer, was killed during a robbery. And suddenly Warrick Dunn became the one raising his 5 younger siblings. He went to college. He made it to the NFL. He earned $60 million. And then he built a foundation called Homes for the Holidays. That foundation has given over 200 fully furnished homes to single mothers and their families, complete with furniture, appliances, and groceries. Not just a down payment, a complete fresh start. He didn't live modestly so he could buy a bigger house for himself. He lived modestly so 200 other families could buy their first house. Most athletes measure wealth by what they keep. Dunn measures it by what he gives. His frugality was never about restriction. It was the funding behind the most important work of his life. Because he didn't just understand what single mothers go through, he lived it at 18 years old. And that experience turned $60 million into something far more valuable than any mansion or car could ever be. Every penny he saved had a purpose, and that purpose already has 200 front doors with families living behind them. But the next player earned almost 3 times as much as Dunn. And his approach to money comes down to one principle so simple. It defined an entire 17-year Hall of Fame career. Now we reach the biggest salary on this list so far, and the simplest philosophy behind it. Larry Fitzgerald is an African-American wide receiver who earned over $179 million across 17 seasons with the Arizona Cardinals. One of the highest paid receivers in NFL history. A Hall of Fame career built on records, respect, and consistency. And through every single season of it, Fitzgerald drove practical cars. Not because he couldn't afford exotic ones. He absolutely could. But because of one principle that guided every financial decision he ever made. If it doesn't improve your life meaningfully, it's just noise. A $300,000 car gets you to practice the same way a $30,000 car does. That extra $270,000. That's noise. And Fitzgerald eliminated the noise for 17 straight years. While his teammates in Phoenix drove exotic vehicles in one of America's biggest car culture cities, Fitzgerald just wasn't interested in the performance. But here's what that quiet discipline actually built. Today, Fitzgerald holds ownership stakes in multiple companies and real estate that put him at owner-level wealth. Not player-level, owner-level. The kind of wealth usually held by the people who sign the checks, not the ones who cash them. $179 million earned on the field, and then multiplied off it through investments that his frugality made possible. He didn't just save his money, he deployed it into assets that work while he sleeps. Practical cars, owner-level wealth. The math checks out perfectly. But the next player didn't just live modestly. He made a declaration so bold and so specific that it became one of the most famous financial statements any NFL player has ever made. And then he proved every single word of it was true. Now here's a declaration that changed everything. Marshawn Lynch is a black running back who earned approximately $50 million playing for the Bills, Seahawks, and Raiders. And he said something publicly that most people still struggle to believe. I haven't spent any NFL money. Not a joke. Not an exaggeration. His own family confirmed it was completely true. Every single NFL game check, untouched. He lived entirely off his endorsement deals and put every dollar of his salary straight into savings and investments. Lynch grew up in Oakland, California, where financial instability wasn't some abstract concept. It was daily life. So when the NFL money arrived, he made a decision most people couldn't sustain for a month, let alone an entire career. That money wasn't his to spend yet, and his daily habits proved it wasn't just talk. At restaurants, his cousin confirmed he'd scan the menu looking for the cheapest item every single time. Not because he couldn't afford the expensive option, but because spending more than necessary felt genuinely wrong to him. $50 million in the bank, and this man is ordering the budget meal. Remember his famous press conferences? The ones where he said, "I'm just here so I won't get fined." That wasn't just about media. It was the same philosophy. He decided what was his to give and what was not. His words weren't for the cameras. His money wasn't for spending. And the most dangerous moment for any athlete's finances isn't retirement. It's the playing years when everyone around you is saying, spend it now. You earned it. You deserve it. Lynch built a mental wall between his NFL money and the present version of himself. And that wall held for his entire career. $50 million. Every single dollar still intact. But somebody heard this story and decided to follow the exact same blueprint. Except his contract makes Lynch's $50 million look almost modest. Now here's where the pattern becomes something bigger. Saquon Barkley is a black superstar running back who has earned over $50 million with the Giants and Eagles. The same approximate earnings as Marshawn Lynch. And when Barkley went public with his financial philosophy, he didn't pretend he invented it. He credited Lynch's blueprint directly and announced he was following the exact same model. He plans to never spend a single dollar of his NFL salary. Every game check goes straight into savings and investments. His endorsement deals fund his daily life. Everything else stays untouched. And there's something quietly powerful happening here. A new generation of black NFL players is looking at the ones who came before them, identifying who kept their money, and choosing to follow their model instead of the 78% who lost it all. Barkley told ESPN he is extremely cheap, and his daily habits prove it. He understands that the average NFL career lasts just 3.3 years. And the difference between retiring secure and going broke comes down to one thing: what you do with the money while it's still coming in. Most young athletes model the flashiest players, the ones with the biggest cars and the loudest lifestyle. Barkley modeled the player with the biggest bank account instead, not the most visible wealth, the most protected wealth. And he made that choice early, before the mistakes that most players make during exactly this window of their careers. Lynch proved the model works. Barkley is living proof that the model is replicable. But the next player on this list didn't start with discipline. He started with mistakes, bad investments, hard lessons, money lost. And then he turned a $300 million career into something built on every single lesson those failures taught him. Now this is the biggest contract on the entire list, and the most honest story behind it. Russell Wilson is a black quarterback who has earned over $300 million playing for the Seahawks, Broncos, and Steelers. $300 million. And he'll tell you straight, he got some of it wrong early on. Bad investments, costly mistakes, money lost on lessons that came with a very expensive price tag. But here's what separates Wilson from the 78% who go broke. He didn't hide from those mistakes. He studied them. He looked at exactly what went wrong, what assumptions had failed, and what he'd do differently. And then he actually changed. Most wealthy people protect the story that they always knew what they were doing. Wilson chose transparency instead, not as a performance of humility, but as a genuine commitment to doing better with what remained. And what remained was still $300 million. His spending today is experience-driven and family-focused, not status-driven. That means investing in memories, relationships, and growth, not in cars and brands that lose value the moment you buy them. Early in his career, he drove practical cars, not because he couldn't afford better, but because he didn't see the point. That habit stayed even after everything else evolved. The mistakes taught him which instincts were always right. And the reformed version of Wilson is proof that wisdom doesn't come from never falling. It comes from studying the fall and never repeating it. But the next player never needed to reform because his system was so extreme from day one that there was simply no room for mistakes. How extreme? He slept inside a football stadium for 2 full years just to avoid paying rent. Now this is the most extreme story on the entire list, and it's completely true. Chad Johnson, also known as Ocho Cinco, is a black wide receiver who earned over $48 million across 11 NFL seasons. One of the most electrifying personalities in football history. And for his first 2 years in the league, he lived inside Paul Brown Stadium, the Cincinnati Bengals' home field. Free food, free showers, free everything, 0 rent. Before that, he lived with his grandmother for 3 years just to save money. His head coach eventually had to walk up to him and say, "Maybe it's time to get your own place." So Johnson rented a 1-bedroom apartment down the street. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, a 1-bedroom on a $48 million career. But the stadium was just the beginning of his system. He flew Spirit Airlines, the cheapest carrier in America, while teammates took first class and private jets. He wore cubic zirconia instead of real diamonds because he liked how jewelry looked but refused to pay the real price. Affordable clothing, budget meals, cheap travel, every single spending category, filtered through the same philosophy. And here's the number that proves it all worked. He saved an estimated 80% of his NFL salary. On $48 million, that's $38.4 million in pure savings. From a man who slept in a football stadium and flew Spirit Airlines. Now think about the contradiction for a second. This is the same man who did the most elaborate touchdown celebrations in NFL history, who legally changed his name to Ochachinko, who was the loudest personality on every field he stepped on. The performance was for the cameras. The finances were managed by a completely different set of values, ones the celebration never touched. Johnson stripped a home down to its real purpose: shelter, food, rest, and realized the stadium did all three better than any apartment for exactly $0. The 80% savings rate was the outcome. Living at the stadium was the mechanism, and the mechanism worked because Johnson was honest about what a home was actually for. But the final player on this list needs no blueprint from anyone, because he signed a contract worth $255 million, and his most visible lifestyle choice is a rental home that costs $2,500 a month. That contrast between those two numbers is exactly where this story has been heading the entire time. And now we reach the name this entire story has been building toward. Jalen Hurts, the black quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, signed a contract worth $255 million in 2023. Then he won the Super Bowl 59 MVP, the biggest contract, the biggest stage, the highest level. And his rent is $2,500 a month. Let those two numbers sit next to each other for a second. $255 million and $2,500 a month. That's what a young professional earning $50,000 a year might pay for a decent apartment. Hurts pays the same on a $250 million contract. Not as a statement, not as a performance for the cameras, because he genuinely believes that living below his means keeps him grounded and focused on football. And then he went out and proved it by winning Super Bowl MVP on the biggest night of his life. The man who chose the $2,500 rental performed at the highest possible level of his sport. Philadelphia fans know where their quarterback lives, and the contrast between his contract and his lifestyle became one of the most talked about stories in the city. Not because Hurts publicized it, but because it was simply too shocking to ignore. Some fans found it inspiring, some found it confusing, all of them found it unforgettable. Because here's what Hurts understood that ties every single player on this list together. Alfred Morris needed a car that worked, $2. Wilkins needed food and shelter, free meals and pennies. Quinn needed flexibility, rented apartments and practical vehicles. Dunn needed purpose, 200 homes for single mothers. Hurts needed focus, $2,500 a month and a Super Bowl MVP. Every single one of them chose what they needed over what they could have performed. The wealth is real, the need is clear, and choosing the need over the performance, consistently, publicly, without apology, is the financial decision that makes the wealth last. 10 stories, 10 players, 1 pattern. And now, the truth that all 10 have been building toward since the very first line. Here's the truth all 10 stories have been building toward. The 78% who go broke and the ones who don't earned the same money and played the same game. The only difference is one decision, made every single day across an entire career. The decision to need less than you have. Morris made it with a $2 car. Hurts made it with $2,500 rent. Different scale, identical decision. We call these players cheap and eccentric, but the flashy ones join the 78%. While the frugal ones keep every dollar. We've been laughing at the wrong people, because the ones we laughed at still have the money. 10 players, 10 stories. From a $2 car to a $255 million contract with $2,500 rent. Morris and his beloved Bentley. Wilkins and his pennies. Quinn and his double career. Dunn and his 200 homes. Fitzgerald and his practical cars. Lynch and his untouched salary. Barkley following the blueprint. Wilson reformed and wiser, Johnson sleeping at the stadium, Hertz grounded in a modest rental. All of them extremely rich. All of them choosing to live like people who understand what money is actually for. Not for performing, for building, not for displaying, for protecting. This story isn't about football. It's about the gap between earning money and actually keeping it. These 10 black NFL players came from communities where financial instability was real. They earned more than most people will see in multiple lifetimes, and they kept it. Because they never let the money change what they understood about what money was for. And that understanding is available to anyone, at any income, starting with whatever is in your pocket right now. If this story changed how you think about wealth and discipline, share it with someone who needs to hear it before the decisions that define their financial future are already made. Subscribe for more stories like this. Real, honest, and built around the choices that separate people who build lasting wealth from people who spend it. And tell us in the comments, which player shocked you most and which habit are you actually going to try this week? Because the most important financial decision of your life might be inspired by a man who drove a $2 car to millionaire practice and never once felt the need to upgrade.